And I think the approach that we have so far is essentially we have to use the AI/ML solution to solve a problem. We're not buying a tool because it's fancy. We are actually specifically dictating a problem that's being thrown with that technology to solve that. And that's number one. And the underlining focus on that is to promote the transparency of the processes that we're using to apply AI or ML. The transparency portion is to kind of go counterculture to policing, where a lot of things are held behind closed doors. We're painfully opening our entire processes from procurement to board approval to the writing of our policies are all public. So we're completely opening up our approach to dealing with AI and ML. One of the things that we've looked at as well is understanding the precision and the deployment factors of how we're going to use AI and ML. And I think it's one of those things that understanding where we're going to use it and how accurate and what the data we are using. Data quality obviously is super important in understanding how we're going to apply it. And I think one of the things is just to combine that all into the transparent processes to ensure that one, the technology is used correctly, and two, specifically that is not being used against someone else's civil liberties. So we are in a different organization that touches upon that. But I can see on a private organization, I think the same thing applies with about the data quality and the actual purpose of what you are using AI/ML for.
The one that I think I've seen teams that I've worked with or managed in the past have challenges with is at the start of an initiative to deploy some sort of AI or ML solution, not having a clear understanding of the operational practice or the day-to-day use of that solution when it's fully implemented. So it was sort of a technology idea to solve some sort of problem, but there wasn't a clear understanding of the day-to-day once it was in. And that caused at least a lot of problems and delays in the project, but maybe caused us problems in terms of getting value from the solution. So a couple of examples were implementing an ML-based solution that was used for threat detection in the SOC, and providing that to the SOC analysts and sort of saying, okay, how are you going to use this new data that we're giving to you? And they really had a lot of difficulty handling it because their level 1 and level 2 analysts were used to getting these deterministic alerts from classical security tools and the SIM solutions. And now we were giving them anomalies. And these anomalies identified anomalies in the environment that weren't necessarily deterministic of an attack on the environment, but just some sort of anomaly. So that was a very different sort of piece of data for them to act upon. And it required a significant change to how that team operated. And we really didn't anticipate that. We went into the project thinking we'd give them the new tool and they would give us a round of applause and then move on with their operational practices. So just thinking about that side of how it's going to work in the day-to-day once implemented. And then the one thing I'll say is if you do get it right, it can be beautiful, right? We're seeing results today from a couple of solutions where in the past, when we would do a red team or we would have an attacker operating, we would have to weed through a lot of noise. There would be a ton of noise, a ton of false positives. And some solutions that are just much smarter today allow us during a red team to see the steps that the attacker is taking in the environment with a lot more precision and without having to weed through the noise. And we can literally just watch it with a lot higher reliability or accuracy of alerting. So it is beautiful when it works, but I would say you need to really pay attention to how you're going to operate it, how you're going to care and feed that solution once it's in production.
At BFL, we're using it today for insider threat management, and we found that it's really great for flagging anomalous behavior that we just don't have the manpower to detect on our own, and it seems to work really effectively there. To the point of where else can we apply it? We are being inundated with signals and trying to make sense of that. Again, it's one of those where it doesn't feel like that's something that humans are going to do really, really well, right? But there is also the disconnect between what's being promised by the vendors and what's actually being delivered in reality. So really curious to hear from the group what were tools they're finding. Andrew, it sounds like you're having some success in terms of sifting through all of the noise to really find the signal. And that's something that we are trying to figure out where can we tap into that and where actually works? Because for us, ideally, back to the resourcing challenge, if we can find tools that can help us with that, it frees up the resources for us also.
Some of the most mundane tasks are really the ones that need the most AI and the most ML. When I was talking to Jeff, I was mentioning that there is this company, what they do is essentially basically do security questionnaires for you. And what they're doing with their AI is they're creating sort of a knowledge base, a database of information that can easily help you answer those security questionnaires for your clients, or vice versa. You can have your vendors go through that process to then get answers out. And so it automates the process of answering any of the questions. And it, because it's an AI engine, it actually begins to learn. And so if you're having to do this frequently, it actually, which we do because we are a B2B business. In this case, it begins to give you the information in a better, like the language gets better as time goes on, right? So the answers get easier and you know what's going on. It also adds, if you're doing your TPRM for your vendors, you now have the ability to also get reports on all kinds of information that kind of just appears to you in a report. So you can actually do that due diligence around privacy and security. And so it's fascinating where this area is going. I think really we need to be thinking of, what do we do still that is so manual that we haven't yet been able to put our arms around and get that automated? Because with the lack of talent and the overwhelming amounts of data that we get, I think that's the only way that we can really put our arms around it.
I did a number of talks, I think, on how to prioritize what parts of AI and ML specifically were really good in targeting cybersecurity for getting the signal, getting a response. I mean, AI takes a lot of decisions that we, frankly, deal with every day. Everything from what we Google to, potentially what information sources we see in threat intelligence are all potentially governed by something that's able to compute that vast amount of data. And so I'd say that things like whether you lost credentials as part of a third-party breach, right? Threat intelligence services that have an ML component are very strong at telling you between the multiple languages, the multiple forms, the multiple messages very quickly, whether that structured data is something that's gone missing, usernames and passwords, right? Certainly there's a very finite structure to process behavior and file analysis that goes into malware protection. So your antivirus product probably getting 40% of its decision-making and based on AI and ML now versus the typical sandbox round trip of signature detection in the past. So those are very key pieces that you can consume because your analysts are not data scientists, right? They're likely not going to be able to start configuring models and writing Python scripts on big data that are going to turn into predictive algorithms for MITRE attacks that you can't see. There's, of course, a pyramid to this, right? So there's very, ready to use burgers you can buy, and then you got to start farming yourself way back of the pack science that you can apply to ML that I think is still in its infancy. Things like risk scoring, right? You talk about risk appetite matrices and whether we're within the appetite and is this risk good or bad or how to prioritize those. It's very bad at doing that, right? It's very bad at taking even unstructured data, like data loss prevention, and starting to really identify whether something is a 16-digit one-masked credit card and telling you if it's truly that or just 16 digits that happen to match a credit card that are buried in some debug file that the DLP is alerting to, right? So there's a lot of things I think in that pyramid that we created that we could share with the audience if they're really keen to see where their tools should benefit from AI and ML and when it's just sort of added to the data sheet as an add-on to say, oh, the analysts are doing some sort of anomaly detection with unsupervised machine learning, and here's how those outliers turn into signal. And that's simply not true, right? The predictive algorithm is going to fall down, high false positive rates, requires a lot of care and feeding, and is not a worthy investment, right? So what is the business practicality of implementing something that has this AI and ML attached to it in very specific ways? It shows up in very good places with structured data, and it shows up in language where I don't think it belongs, where you're talking about content awareness or risk prioritization, and it does very poorly there in terms of the value, right? And what we're really looking for is not to build machine learning practices in our businesses. I don't think any business here really is trying to advance the science of ML with respect to cybersecurity prevention. You want the outcome of saving time and money, right? And that you want that quick signal, quick action, accurate, that's going to stop the latest attack, which could be Vezina, could be the next version of it, that we want to dynamically adapt and block, right? And so those are really the practical uses of AI and ML right now.